A scalpel buried deep in Reagan Hancock's neck. An unborn baby cut from her mother's womb, both victims dead within hours. For 10 months, Taylor Parker lived the perfect pregnancy lie. Baby showers. Gender reveals. Fake ultrasound photos shared on social media. Her boyfriend believed every detail of their impending parenthood. But Parker had a problem: she wasn't actually pregnant. And when the lies threatened to unravel, she decided to steal someone else's baby. On the morning of the murder, Parker watched instructional videos on premature infant delivery. She researched cesarean procedures. She prepared her tools. Then she drove to New Boston, Texas, where her friend Reagan, 8 months pregnant and trusting, was waiting. What happened next shocked seasoned investigators. Reagan Simmons-Hancock, 21, was brutally attacked and killed. Her unborn daughter, Braxlynn Sage, was cut from her womb. Both mother and baby died. Parker's elaborate deception had become a double homicide. But here's what investigators couldn't immediately answer. Was this the desperate act of a woman terrified of losing her boyfriend? Or the calculated crime of someone who'd been planning murder for months? The Bowie County jury took less than an hour to find her guilty. The death sentence came just weeks later. The victim's mother called Parker an evil piece of flesh demon. Now Parker sits on death row, one of only 7 women awaiting execution in Texas. Tonight, we uncover the chilling timeline of deception that led to murder. The evidence that sealed Parker's fate. And the haunting questions that remain about how far someone will go to maintain a lie. October 9, 2020. New Boston, Texas. Reagan Michelle Simmons-Hancock, 21 years old, woke up that Friday morning carrying the weight of hope. 8 months pregnant. Her belly rounded with the promise of Braxlynn Sage, a daughter she'd already named, already loved, already imagined holding. Her 3-year-old daughter Kinley Grace played in the living room, blonde curls bouncing as children's laughter filled the modest home on Pine Street. Reagan had everything to live for and no reason to suspect she had less than 12 hours left. Born in Hope, Arkansas, on November 14, 1998, Reagan embodied the small-town values that shaped East Texas communities. She attended J.C. Cowboy Church in Louisville, Arkansas. She loved her family fiercely. She trusted easily. Her husband Homer worked hard to provide for their growing family, and Reagan spent her days preparing for baby number 2. The nursery was ready. Pink walls painted with careful strokes. Tiny clothes folded in drawers. A crib waiting for Braxlynn's first night home. Reagan's due date was still weeks away, but expectant mothers know that babies arrive on their own timeline. She'd learned that lesson with Kinley. But on that October morning, Reagan wasn't thinking about early labor pains or hospital bags. She was thinking about friendship. Taylor Parker had called, her acquaintance from their social circle, someone Reagan considered trustworthy enough to welcome into her home. Parker said she needed to see her. Something urgent. Reagan opened her door that morning believing she was helping a friend. She had no way of knowing that Parker had spent weeks researching how to cut a baby from a woman's womb. No way of knowing that her visitor carried weapons designed for surgical precision. No way of knowing that her 3-year-old would witness something that would haunt investigators for months. When the sun set on October 9, 2020, 2 heartbeats had stopped forever. Reagan's widower Homer would later tell the court, "The first time I got to hold my Braxlynn Sage, she was cold and lifeless. I will never see her eyes or hear her say, 'I love you, Daddy.'" But here's what makes this case particularly chilling. Parker didn't just kill Reagan and steal her baby. She tried to pass off the dying infant as her own child, rushing to a hospital with an elaborate story about giving birth in her car. The question that haunted investigators from the very first hour: how long had Parker been planning this nightmare? And what drove a woman to commit such unthinkable evil for the sake of maintaining a lie? February 2020. East Texas. Taylor Rene Parker had a secret that made her pregnancy announcement impossible. She'd had a hysterectomy. Her tubes were tied. Her womb was gone. But when she looked into Wade Griffin's eyes and saw his excitement about becoming a father, she made a choice that would define the next 10 months of elaborate deception. She announced their pregnancy on Facebook. March 14, 2020. A girl, she claimed. Wade was delighted. The lie that would end in murder had officially begun. Parker didn't just tell people she was expecting, she became a method actor in her own twisted performance. She ordered custom ultrasound photos online, complete with specific gestation dates, the baby's sex confirmed to medical precision, and legitimate clinic names and physician signatures. The prosecution would later enter identical fake ultrasound materials into evidence, showing the calculated nature of her deception. But Parker's attention to detail went far beyond fake medical records. She purchased a silicone pregnancy belly from an online retailer. The same type of fake bump that would later be displayed in a Texas courtroom as evidence of premeditated fraud. She wore it religiously, adjusting the size as her supposed pregnancy progressed. Photos from family gatherings show Parker cradling her artificial bump, her face glowing with manufactured maternal joy. She staged a gender reveal party, complete with pink balloons and celebrating friends who had no idea they were participating in an elaborate charade. She scheduled hospital appointments to pre-register for labor, a move designed to convince anyone still harboring doubts about her condition. She researched pregnancy symptoms and mimicked them with Academy Award-worthy precision. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Parker's deception was her use of technology to support her lies. She used VoIP applications to send herself text messages, creating fake conversations with family members who appeared to support her pregnancy claims. When Wade's mother, Connie Griffin, grew suspicious and confronted them, Parker had screenshots ready, manufactured evidence of family discussions about baby preparations. Connie Griffin knew the truth. She tried desperately to convince her son, Wade, she is not pregnant. She had a hysterectomy when Trey was born. He's 5. She's not pregnant, Wade. But Wade couldn't process that level of calculated deception from the woman he loved. The months crawled forward. Parker's performance never wavered. She discussed nursery preparations. She shared pregnancy cravings. She complained about morning sickness and back pain with the expertise of someone who'd thoroughly researched every symptom. But behind the performance, darker preparations were taking place. Between September 15 and October 9, 2020, Parker made multiple trips to pregnancy-related locations across East Texas: Idabel, Longview, Texarkana, Mount Pleasant, 6 separate visits to Paris, Texas, and at least 1 trip to Shreveport. Investigators would later theorize these were scouting missions, times when Parker was searching for a pregnant woman whose baby she could steal. October was approaching. Parker's fabricated due date loomed. Wade expected to hold his child. The hospital expected her arrival. Her entire social circle anticipated meeting the baby that existed only in her imagination. Normal people might have confessed, might have admitted the truth and accepted the consequences. But Taylor Parker had spent 10 months building a reality where she was carrying Wade Griffin's child. And when faced with the collapse of that reality, she made a decision that would shock investigators, prosecutors, and a jury of her peers. If she couldn't give birth to Wade's baby, she would steal someone else's. The question that would haunt the courtroom during her trial: when does desperate deception cross the line into premeditated murder? And how long had Parker been planning to cut a baby from another woman's womb? October 9, 2020. 9:30 a.m. New Boston, Texas. Parker arrived at Reagan's home carrying a claw hammer, a mason jar, and surgical scalpels. What happened next was so savage that veteran investigators would struggle to testify without breaking composure. Reagan Simmons-Hancock never had a chance. The attack began in the living room where 3-year-old Kinley played nearby. Parker struck Reagan with the claw hammer, both the claw end and the blunt end, fracturing her skull in 5 separate places. The medical examiner would later testify that Reagan suffered a broken nose, extensive defensive wounds on her hands and arms as she fought desperately for her life, and more than 100 stab wounds. But the hammer wasn't enough. Parker grabbed the mason jar from Reagan's own baby shower filled with pink and blue sand from her gender reveal party and beat her with it until it shattered. Then came the scalpels. Parker stabbed Reagan 113 times with surgical precision. Some wounds measured 4.5 inches deep. She cut Reagan open from hip to hip, pulled her uterus out, and sliced it open to remove baby Braxlynn. A scalpel blade was found buried so deep in Reagan's neck that investigators initially missed it during the crime scene processing. The entire attack lasted approximately 20 minutes. Reagan fought until her final breath. Her defensive wounds told the story of a mother fighting not just for her own life, but for her unborn daughter's survival. Throughout this nightmare, Reagan's 3-year-old daughter remained in the house, a witness to horrors no child should ever see. Parker left Reagan's mutilated body in a pool of blood and fled with the dying baby. But this wasn't a crime of passion or momentary desperation. The surgical instruments, the calculated brutality, the methodical cutting, every detail revealed months of planning. The question that would haunt the courtroom: how does someone research infant delivery techniques and cesarean procedures without anyone suspecting they're preparing for murder? And what kind of person uses a victim's own baby shower decorations as a weapon? 10:47 a.m. McCurtain Memorial Hospital, Idabel, Oklahoma. Parker burst through the emergency room doors carrying a dying baby, her clothes soaked in blood. She screamed that she'd just given birth in her car on Highway 259. The umbilical cord was still attached tucked inside her pants leg like a grotesque prop in her twisted performance. But medical professionals knew immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. Dr. Curtis Hawkins examined the infant and found no signs of natural birth. No vernix covering the skin. No signs of passage through the birth canal. The baby's injuries were consistent with violent extraction from the womb, not natural delivery. Most damning of all, Parker refused to let doctors examine her, claiming she was fine, despite allegedly having just delivered a premature baby. Nurse Jennifer Dansby grew suspicious when Parker wouldn't consent to medical evaluation. She didn't want them to check her, Dansby later testified. The umbilical cord placement, the baby's condition, Parker's evasive behavior, everything pointed to deception. Meanwhile, 60 miles south in New Boston, Texas, Reagan's mother had arrived at her daughter's home for a planned visit. She found the front door standing open. She called her daughter's name. No response. She walked inside and discovered a scene that would haunt investigators for years: Reagan's mutilated body in a pool of blood, her womb cut open, her unborn child gone. Baby Braxlynn Sage died 90 minutes after Parker arrived at the hospital. She never had a chance to take her first natural breath. The violent extraction had caused irreversible trauma that no medical intervention could repair. By noon, two separate crime scenes were being processed simultaneously: Reagan's blood-soaked living room and the hospital where Parker's elaborate lies were falling apart under medical scrutiny. The question that prosecutors would later pose to the jury: how does someone plan such a horrific crime and still expect to convince medical professionals that they'd naturally given birth? And what kind of person uses a dying baby as a prop in their desperate performance? September 2022. Bowie County Courthouse. New Boston, Texas. Prosecutors called it the case of 10 lifetimes. The courtroom was packed. The evidence was overwhelming. And Taylor Parker's web of lies was about to unravel in front of 12 jurors who would decide if she lived or died. Texas Department of Public Safety investigators testified that Parker had watched numerous online videos about delivering babies and caring for newborns in the days before Reagan's murder. Her browser history revealed searches for how to perform a cesarean section, how long can a baby survive after being cut from the womb, and premature infant care. Each search was time-stamped, creating a digital timeline of premeditation. The prosecution painted a picture of calculated evil that had been months in the making. Defense attorney Jeff Harrelson faced an impossible task. How do you defend the indefensible? He argued mental illness, desperation, a woman who had lost touch with reality. But the evidence spoke louder than any psychological explanation. October 3, 2022. The jury received their instructions at 2:47 p.m. They returned with a verdict in less than an hour. Guilty of capital murder. Guilty of kidnapping. But the most emotional testimony came during the sentencing phase. Reagan's mother, Jessica Brooks, looked directly at Parker and delivered words that would echo through the courthouse. "You are an evil piece of flesh, demon." The courtroom fell silent. Even hardened court reporters struggled to maintain composure. November 9, 2022. The same jury that convicted Parker in under an hour sentenced her to death. No recommendation for mercy. No life sentence. Death. The question that lingered as Parker was led away in shackles: how does a jury decide so quickly that someone deserves to die? And what does it take to earn such a unanimous condemnation from 12 strangers? November 13, 2022. Mountain View Unit, Gatesville, Texas. Taylor Parker, 29 years old, became the 7th woman on Texas death row. The youngest female inmate awaiting execution in America's most prolific death penalty state. Her new home, a 6 by 10 foot concrete cell where she'll spend 23 hours of every day waiting to die. The Mountain View Unit houses Texas's most dangerous female criminals, murderers, conspirators, and now Parker, whose crime shocked even seasoned correction officers. Her daily routine is rigid. Wake up at 4:30 a.m. Count time. Breakfast through a slot in her door. 1 hour of recreation in a caged outdoor area. Shower 3 times a week. Mail call. Lights out at 10 p.m. No physical contact with other inmates. No television in her cell. Just concrete walls and the endless echo of her own thoughts. Parker joins an exclusive group of women condemned to die in Texas. Only 7 out of 196 death row inmates are female. The odds of a woman being executed in Texas are statistically rare. Since 1976, only 6 women have been executed by the state. The last was Kimberly McCarthy in 2013. The appeals process will likely stretch for decades. Automatic appeals to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Federal habeas corpus petitions. Constitutional challenges. The average time between sentencing and execution in Texas is approximately 15 years. But here's what makes Parker's case different from most death row inmates: the overwhelming evidence of premeditation, the horrific nature of the crime, and the swift jury verdict suggest fewer grounds for successful appeals. Meanwhile, Reagan's family continues to grieve. Homer Hancock raises his 3-year-old daughter alone, forever haunted by the question she asks, "Where's Mommy?" Parker's lies destroyed two families: Reagan's through murder, and her own through the consequences of unthinkable evil. The question that haunts correction officers who pass her cell each day: what does someone think about when they know they're going to die for cutting a baby from a woman's womb? And how does someone live with the knowledge that their desperate lies led to the death penalty? September 16, 2025. Nearly 3 years after the verdict, Taylor Rene Parker remains alive on Texas death row. The woman who cut a baby from Reagan Hancock's womb sits in her 6x10 cell, breathing air that Reagan and Braxlynn will never breathe again. Her appeals process crawls through the courts while two families live forever changed by her desperate lies. The statistics are stark. 2 lives lost. 1 3-year-old girl left motherless. 1 husband forced to raise his daughter alone, answering impossible questions about why Mommy never came home. 1 family destroyed by grief. Another destroyed by the consequences of unthinkable evil. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this case isn't what happened, it's what could have been prevented. The warning signs were everywhere. Wade Griffin's mother, Connie, suspected the pregnancy was fake. Medical impossibility: Parker had undergone a hysterectomy. 10 months of elaborate deception that should have unraveled under scrutiny. Internet searches for cesarean procedures and infant delivery that painted a roadmap to murder. Yet Reagan Simmons-Hancock still opened her door that October morning, trusting a woman who had spent months planning to kill her. The Bowie County jury needed less than an hour to condemn Parker to death. In Texas, where capital punishment is commonplace, her crimes stood out as uniquely horrific. The premeditation. The brutality. The use of surgical instruments to cut a baby from a living woman's womb. Even seasoned prosecutors called it the case of 10 lifetimes. Reagan's mother's words echo through courtrooms across America. "You are an evil piece of flesh, demon." Raw grief transformed into raw truth. Some crimes are so heinous they defy comprehension or forgiveness. Today, Homer Hancock raises his daughter without her mother. The nursery that Reagan prepared for Braxlynn remains empty. Pink walls painted with hope now stand as a monument to dreams that will never be fulfilled. Meanwhile, Parker's own family grapples with the reality that someone they loved was capable of such calculated evil. The case raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of deception and trust in our society. How many lies can someone tell before those around them recognize the pattern? When does willful ignorance become complicity? And what drives a human being to commit murder rather than admit they've been living a lie? Parker's death sentence may take decades to carry out, if it's carried out at all. The appeals process will drag through federal courts, constitutional challenges, and potential commutations. She may die of old age before the state of Texas ever gets the chance to execute her for her crimes. But justice isn't always about the final punishment. Sometimes it's about the acknowledgement that certain acts deserve society's ultimate condemnation. The question that lingers as we close this chapter: in a world where technology makes deception easier than ever, how many Taylor Parkers are living among us, building elaborate lies that might one day explode into unthinkable violence? And what will it take for society to recognize the warning signs before another Reagan Hancock answers the wrong door? What do you think? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Was justice served? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into cases that challenge everything we think we know about human nature.